Hi and welcome to this episode of the vlog. Today we are going to tackle making some curtains for our Narrowboat Jubilee. We saw some ready-made curtains that went with our cushions and roller blinds, and we thought, how could we shrink these to Narrowboat size? Now before I start, I should say I'm not a seamstress, so I had to figure out how to do this along the way. Also, I found that curtains were not as uniform as I expected, so I had to do some extra work to fix this. Let's see how we get on. First thing I did was to unpack the curtains and lay them out so I could have a good look at them. I wanted to keep the proportions between the light blue and the dark blue about the same as the original curtains. So to make the most of the material, I unpicked the top eyelet band to eke as much as possible. If working with plain or more uniform pattern, this is totally unnecessary, as the curtains will be long enough so you can just cut the eyelet band off. Now we need to pin the curtain to where we want it, so I'm going to turn this piece at the top over by about 1 centimetre so that you get rid of the rough tatty edge, and that will stop it from fraying when you run the machine along it. All these threads will just run if you was to just stitch it, and it would look quite ugly. So you flap a little piece over to tidy it up and to make a nice hem, and then we're going to turn it over to give us a bit of a band to put the eyelets in. So I have been making my band along the top about 7.5 centimetres. I find that just gives us enough room to get a little frill along the top, and plenty of room to put the eyelet in itself. So I've got about 7.5 centimetres there, and then I'm looking down to my little stripe here, and mine are about 13.5 centimetres, which is what I've been working to. So looks like I did need all of that material after all. Sometimes I've had to make this hem quite a bit thinner, which just to get all the material, and then other times I've actually had to cut pieces off. That's how ununiform the curtains, the ready-mades are. Okay, so now we've got this messy end here to deal with, and I want it to look something similar to the original curtain. So I need to make my top panel here pop in tidily into this side seam, and it's a little bit fiddly, but if we just fold that over like that, you can see that just tidies that edge up. and we can slide a couple of pins in there. Sometimes it does take a little bit more fiddling in, sometimes they go nice and easy. Now I'm putting my pins in this way round so that I can slide them out nice and easily as my machine runs down the material. It's a bit of a cheat because, as I said before, it should really be tacked, but I don't find that much easier. I just put plenty of pins in and I whiz them out as I run the machine along, but I would make a good seamstress cry. And there we go, that's tidied up that top edge quite nicely, ready to put in the machine. I'm going to put in more pins along here once I've checked and double checked all my measurements. I've got another curtain to measure this up against because I want to make sure that it's absolutely the same as the other one, so that when they're hanging they look nice and uniform. So I've got my machine all set up, it's all thread and the bobbin's all thread and it's all ready to go. So I am going to take this first pin carefully out, not to disturb where everything is, lower my foot down of the machine, and then we're just going to do this fiddly edge. So I run down here, I go back on myself so that it just means my stitches don't all come adrift, it just stitches over itself, and that's kind of like a knot for it. And then we'll slowly run down here, and I'm going to run down further than the top, because if you remembered, I opened up this seam a little bit just to get my piece of material in the side seam. So I'm just going to run it down a little bit further than I unpicked, and then just go over itself again, and then I need to lift my needle up and whiz the material out for that little side piece and cut my threads off, and then we can run down the top. So I'm going to measure from the top of my curtain down the material, make sure it's all nice and straight. Material is very tricky because you can measure it 3 different times and get 3 different measurements, so I would advise to measure and re-measure. So there's my 86 centimetres. So I'm going to put a nice little line of measurements down here so that I can draw a line and join them all together. And now from that line I want another 10 centimetres for my hem. Basically you can fold your material over. I need this line so that it comes to the bottom of my curtain, so I'm going to fold it over and fold it to that line, and then I need to fold it over one more time, as that's my 86 centimetre marker, how long I want mine to be. Oh, and I've lost my pins again. And then my pins are going to go this way for my sewing machine. Now we have our curtain stitched, the band across the top to put the eyelets in and the hem complete, we need to think about the spacing for the eyelets. And because the narrowboat curtains are smaller and the curtain pole sits closer to the hole than at home, they need to be spaced closer together to make pleats in the correct proportion. So we played around with the material and decided 18 seemed to be the best amount needed and spaced them evenly across the curtain, bearing in mind that the first and the last eyelets need to be set in to avoid cutting the stitches of the side seams. I've placed my eyelets roughly halfway on the band to allow for a nice frill effect above the curtain pole. Having worked out the spacing, I placed the eyelets over my markers and visually checked that they looked okay before drawing around the insides of the rings ready to cut out. Eyelet holes, I found it easiest to pinch in the middle of the drawn circle and snip the material, being very careful not to stray out of the circle mark. Then to cut out with nice sharp scissors. Once the holes were cut, I used the press to insert the eyelet, and because the material was quite thin, they still turned a little. So to tighten them up, I used the punch and die. Well, that's my little curtain project finished, so hopefully you think it's an improvement as much as we do, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.